Imagine a people newly arrived in the land promised by God. After years of wandering through the desert, they had finally found a place to call home. Israel had conquered much of the land under the leadership of Joshua, the chosen successor of Moses. The battles had been fierce, the walls of Jericho had fallen, and the land was distributed among the 12 tribes. But now Joshua was no longer among them. The people faced a major challenge: to remain faithful to God while striving to fully possess and establish themselves in the promised land. This is where the story of the book of Judges begins, a time when God raised up leaders called judges to deliver his people whenever they turned away from him and suffered at the hands of their enemies. It's a story of repeated cycles of downfall and rescue that shows us how God never abandons his people even when they forget him. The sun was setting over the hills of Canaan. The elders of Israel had gathered for the funeral of Joshua, son of Nun, servant of the Lord. Judges 2:8-9 tells us, Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. And they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Joshua's death marked the end of an era for the people of Israel. He had been Moses' right-hand man, witnessed the parting of the Red Sea, spied out the land of Canaan, and ultimately led the conquest of the Promised Land. Now, without him, the tribes of Israel were left without a central leader to unite them. Each tribe had received its portion of land, as recorded in the book of Joshua. Now they had to complete the conquest of their own territories. Judges 1:1-2 reads, After the death of Joshua, the Israelites asked the Lord, Who of us is to go up first to fight against the Canaanites? The Lord answered, Judah shall go up. I have given the land into their hands. The tribe of Judah took the lead and invited their fellow tribe Simeon to join them in battle. Judges 1:3 recounts, Then Judah said to Simeon his brother, Come up with me into the territory allotted to me, that we may fight against the Canaanites, and I likewise will go with you into the territory allotted to you. So Simeon went with him. They achieved significant victories. In Bezek, they defeated 10,000 men under the command of Adoni-Bezek. In Jerusalem, they captured the city and set it on fire. In the Negev and the hill country, they also drove out the Canaanites. Judges 1:19 tells us, The Lord was with the men of Judah. They took possession of the hill country, but they were unable to drive the people from the plains because they had chariots fitted with iron. That last phrase highlights a recurring issue in the conquest. Despite many victories, the Israelites were unable to completely drive out the Canaanites from the land. Other tribes faced similar difficulties. Judges 1:21 says, The Benjamites, however, did not drive out the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. Judges 1:22-26 explains that the house of Joseph captured Bethel, but not fully, and the pattern continues in Judges 1:27-33. Manasseh did not drive out the people of Bethshean. Ephraim did not drive out the Canaanites living in Gezer. Zebulun did not drive out the residents of Kitron. Asher did not drive out the inhabitants of Akko. Naphtali did not drive out the people of Beth-Shemesh. This failure to fully conquer the land had a deeper reason. God had commanded the total removal of the Canaanite peoples, not just for territorial reasons, but to protect Israel from their idolatrous influence. In Deuteronomy 7:1-4, even before entering the land, Moses had warned, When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, and drives out before you many nations, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you, and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them, and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods, and the Lord's anger will burn against you, and will quickly destroy you. Instead of driving them out, many of the tribes chose to make treaties and subject the Canaanites to forced labor. Judges 1:28 says, When Israel became strong, They pressed the Canaanites into forced labor, but never drove them out completely. This coexistence with the Canaanite peoples sowed the seeds for future idolatry in Israel. The angel of the Lord appeared to the people at Bochim with a grave message. In Judges 2:1-3, we read, "I brought you up out of Egypt and led you into the land I swore to give to your ancestors. I said, I will never break my covenant with you, and you shall not make a covenant with the people of this land, but you shall break down their altars. Yet you have disobeyed me. Why have you done this? And I have also said, I will not drive them out before you. They will become traps for you, and their gods will become snares to you." The people wept and offered sacrifices to the Lord at that place, which was called Bochim, meaning weepers. But the divine warning was clear. Living alongside the Canaanites would be like thorns in Israel's side, and their gods would become a dangerous snare for the chosen people. A new generation arose in Israel, children of those who had entered the land with Joshua. Judges 2:10 tells us, "After that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who neither knew the Lord nor what he had done for Israel." This lack of knowledge about the Lord and his mighty works led Israel into a cycle of sin that would repeat throughout the book of Judges. This pattern is laid out clearly in Judges 2:11-19 and becomes the hallmark of this entire period in Israel's history. The cycle began with apostasy, when Israel abandoned the Lord and followed other gods. Judges 2:11-12 says, "Then the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord and served the Baals. They forsook the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Lord's anger. Baal was the Canaanite god of fertility and storms. His worship promised abundant rain and fruitful harvests, something especially tempting to an agrarian people like Israel. Alongside Baal, Asherah, his consort, was also worshipped, often represented by wooden poles. Their cult involved immoral rituals and human sacrifices, practices detestable in the eyes of the Lord. Israel's apostasy was not just a religious shift, it was a betrayal of their covenant with God. Like a wife abandoning her husband, Israel forsook the God who had delivered them from Egypt to follow foreign gods. This led to the second stage of the cycle, oppression. Judges 2:14 states, "The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he handed them over to raiders who plundered them. He sold them to their enemies all around, whom they were no longer able to resist." God used the surrounding nations as instruments of discipline for Israel. This oppression wasn't an act of abandonment, but of loving correction. Just as a father disciplines his child for the child's own good, God allowed Israel to experience the consequences of their poor choices. Under the weight of their oppressors, Israel would enter the third stage of the cycle, crying out. Although the text doesn't always use the word cry explicitly when describing the overall cycle, this element is present in each individual episode. For example, in Judges 3:9 we read, "But when the Israelites cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer." This cry represented a temporary turning back to God. In their anguish, the people remembered the Lord and called out for help. It wasn't always a deep or lasting repentance, but God, in his mercy, heard their cry. This led to the fourth stage, deliverance. Judges 2:16 says, "Then the Lord raised up judges who saved them out of the hands of these raiders." These judges were not like our modern-day legal authorities. They were deliverers, military leaders and rulers raised up by God to rescue his people. The Hebrew word for judge is shophet, which refers to someone who administers justice, governs, or leads. These judges were anointed by the Spirit of the Lord for a specific mission: to deliver Israel from its oppressors and restore faithfulness to God. Following deliverance came a period of peace, Judges 2:18 tells us, "Whenever the Lord raised up a judge for them, he was with the judge and saved them out of the hands of their enemies as long as the judge lived." This was a time of relative faithfulness while the judge lived and continued to influence the people. But this peace was only temporary. Judges 2:19 describes, "But when the judge died, the people returned to ways even more corrupt than those of their ancestors, following other gods and serving and worshipping them. They refused to give up their evil practices and stubborn ways, and so the cycle would begin again. Apostasy, oppression, crying out, deliverance, and temporary peace." This pattern repeated itself throughout the book of Judges, revealing both the human tendency towards sin and God's faithfulness in responding to his people's cries. The Lord allowed this cycle to continue as a test for Israel. Judges 2:22 explains, "I will use them to test Israel and see whether they will keep the way of the Lord and walk in it as their ancestors did." The nations that remained in the land also served to teach the younger generations of Israelites how to fight, as we see in Judges 3:1-2. The first turn of the cycle began when the people turned away from God. Judges 3:7 tells us, "The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They forgot the Lord their God and served the Baals and the Asherahs. As a result of Israel's idolatry came oppression." Judges 3:8 recounts, "The anger of the Lord burned against Israel, so that he sold them into the hands of Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram-Naharaim, to whom the Israelites were subject for 8 years. Cushan-Rishathaim means cushion of double. Wickedness, a name that reflects the harshness of his rule. Mesopotamia, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, modern-day Iraq, was hundreds of kilometers away from Israel, demonstrating the wide reach of divine judgment. For 8 years, Israel suffered under this foreign yoke. Finally, they cried out to God. Judges 3:9 says, "But when they cried out to the Lord, he raised up for them a deliverer, Othniel son of Kenaz, Caleb's younger brother, who saved them." Othniel was no stranger to Israel. He had already proven his bravery when he captured Kiriath-Sepher, also known as Debir, and, as a reward, received Achsah, Caleb's daughter, as his wife, as noted in Judges 1:12-13. Caleb, along with Joshua, had been one of the 2 faithful spies who gave a positive report of the Promised Land 40 years earlier. Othniel belonged to the tribe of Judah, the tribe chosen by God to lead the conquest after Joshua's death. As a leader, he was specially empowered. Judges 3:10 tells us, "The Spirit of the Lord came on him, so that he became Israel's judge and went to war. The Lord gave Cushan-Rishathaim, king of Aram, into the hands of Othniel, who overpowered him." This is the first mention in the book of Judges of someone being empowered by the Spirit of the Lord, a pattern that would repeat with future judges. The Spirit enabled Othniel not only to judge, administer authority, and resolve disputes, but also to lead Israel in battle against their oppressors. The Bible doesn't provide details about the battle between Othniel and Cushan-Rishathaim. We only know that he overpowered him, a phrase that suggests a decisive victory. Under Othniel's leadership, Israel was freed from the grip of Mesopotamia. The result of this deliverance was a long period of peace. Judges 3:11 states, "So the land had peace for 40 years, until Othniel son of Kenaz died." For 4 decades, while Othniel lived and judged Israel, the people remained faithful to the Lord and enjoyed peace. These 40 years of peace represent roughly 1 generation. During this time, Israel could tend their fields, raise their children, and worship the Lord without fear of foreign invasion. It was a time of prosperity and security, the fruit of faithfulness to God. But the cycle would continue. After Othniel's Death, Israel returned to its old ways. Judges 3:12 reports, "Once again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and because they did this evil, the Lord gave Eglon king of Moab power over Israel." Moab was a neighboring nation east of the Dead Sea. The Moabites were descendants of Moab, the son of Lot by his eldest daughter, as recorded in Genesis 19:37. Although they were distant relatives of the Israelites, there was hostility between the two nations. Eglon, king of Moab, didn't act alone. Judges 3:13 tells us, getting the Ammonites and Amalekites to join him, Eglon came and attacked Israel, and they took possession of the city of Palms. The city of Palms was Jericho, the first city conquered by Israel upon entering the Promised Land. Its fall symbolized the seriousness of Israel's situation. The oppression was harsh and long-lasting. Judges 3:14 states, "The Israelites were subject to Eglon, king of Moab, for 18 years. For nearly 2 decades, Israel paid tribute and lived under foreign rule, twice as long as they had served Cushan-Rishathaim." After these years of suffering, the pattern repeated. Judges 3:15 records, "Again the Israelites cried out to the Lord, and he gave them a deliverer, Ehud, a left-handed man, the son of Gera the Benjamite." Ehud was from the tribe of Benjamin, whose territory bordered Jericho and was near Moab. The text highlights an unusual trait. Ehud was left-handed. The Hebrew phrase literally means restricted in his right hand, which might suggest a physical disability or simply that he was naturally left-handed. This detail played a crucial role in Ehud's plan to deliver Israel. In a time when most people were right-handed, left-handed fighters had a tactical advantage, as their movements were less expected and harder to defend against. Israel sent Ehud to deliver tribute to Eglon. Judges 3:15 continues, "The Israelites sent him with tribute to Eglon, king of Moab." This diplomatic mission gave Ehud the chance to get close to the Moabite king. Before setting out, Ehud prepared a special weapon. Judges 3:16 says, "Now Ehud had made a double-edged sword about a cubit long, which he strapped to his right thigh, under his clothing." A cubit was roughly 18 inches, about 45 cm, a short sword, easy to conceal but deadly at close range. He placed the sword on his right thigh, opposite from where weapons were typically carried. Because Ehud was left-handed, he could draw the sword quickly with his left hand, an unexpected move for any observer. After delivering the tribute, Ehud set his plan in motion. Judges 3:18 reports, "After Ehud had presented the tribute, he sent on their way those who had carried it. He dismissed his companions, but returned alone to the king with a pretext." Judges 3:19 continues, "But on reaching the stone images near Gilgal, he went back to Eglon and said, 'Your Majesty, I have a secret message for you.' The king said to his attendants, 'Leave us,' and they all left." The mention of the stone images near Gilgal is striking. Gilgal had been Israel's first campsite in the Promised Land, where 12 memorial stones were set up after crossing the Jordan. Now apparently, pagan idols stood there. Another sign of Israel's spiritual decline. Ehud seized the moment of privacy. Judges 3:20 says, "Ehud then approached him while he was sitting alone in the upper room of his palace and said, 'I have a message from God for you.'" As the king rose from his seat, the mention of a divine message prompted Eglon to stand, perhaps out of reverence or fear. This movement made him vulnerable. Judges 3:21 continues, "Ehud reached with his left hand, drew the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly." The text vividly describes the aftermath. Judges 3:22 says, "Even the handle sank in after the blade, and his bowels discharged. Ehud did not pull the sword out, and the fat closed in over it. The sword was buried so deep in the corpulent king that the hilt vanished into the fat, and the blade emerged from the other side. Ehud then made his escape. according to Judges 3:23. Then Ehud went out to the porch. He shut the doors of the upper room behind him and locked them. When the attendants returned and found the doors locked, they assumed the king was relieving himself in the upper room. Judges 3:25 tells us they waited to the point of embarrassment, but when he did not open the doors of the room, they took a key and unlocked them. There they saw their lord fallen to the floor, dead. This delay gave Ehud ample time to flee. Judges 3:26 says, while they waited, Ehud got away. He passed by the stone images and escaped to Sarah. Upon reaching the hill country of Ephraim, Ehud sounded the trumpet to rally Israel for battle. Judges 3:27 reports, when he arrived there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went down with him from the hills, with him leading them. Taking advantage of the confusion caused by Eglon's death, Ehud led Israel in a surprise attack on the Moabites. Judges 3:28 says, "Follow me," he ordered, "for the Lord has given Moab, your enemy, into your hands." So they followed him down and took possession of the fords of the Jordan that led to Moab. They allowed no one to cross over. The fords were shallow crossings of the Jordan River where one could pass on foot. By seizing control of them, the Israelites blocked escape routes and reinforcements for the Moabites in Israelite territory. The victory was overwhelming. Judges 3:29 reports, at that time they struck down about 10,000 Moabites, all vigorous and strong. Not one escaped. The death of King Eglon and the destruction of his army freed Israel from Moabite oppression. The result was a long era of peace. Judges 3:30 says, that day Moab was made subject to Israel, and the land had peace for 80 years. This was the longest period of peace recorded in the book of Judges, 80 years, double the peace. That followed Israel's deliverance by Othniel. The account of the third judge is surprisingly brief. Judges 3:31 says, after him came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. In just one verse, the Bible tells us Shamgar's entire story. We don't know what tribe he came from, how long he judged Israel, or any other personal detail. Even his name, Shamgar, is unusual and possibly of foreign origin. What we do know is that he fought against the Philistines, a people who would later become Israel's main enemy in the time of Samson, Samuel, and David. The Philistines were a seafaring people who settled on the southwestern coast of Canaan, modern-day Gaza region. They were known for their military prowess and their mastery of iron technology. The weapon Shamgar used is described as an ox goad, a long agricultural tool about 8 feet or 2.5 meters, with a metal tip used to prod oxen while plowing. It wasn't a conventional weapon, but in Shamgar's hands it became deadly. The number of Philistines killed, 600, suggests this wasn't a single battle, but likely a series of skirmishes. Using a farming tool to defeat 600 armed warriors clearly required exceptional courage and extraordinary skill. The Bible concludes by saying, he too saved Israel, indicating that, like Othniel and Ehud, Shamgar was used by God to deliver his people from oppression. However, there's no mention of the Spirit of the Lord coming upon him, nor are there details about how long peace lasted after his victory. The brevity of Shamgar's story might suggest that his time as judge was short, or that his influence was geographically limited to a specific region in Israel. It's also possible that his judgeship overlapped with that of Ehud, or even Deborah, the next judge mentioned in the book. Despite the lack of information, Shamgar's story offers a powerful lesson. God can use unlikely tools to accomplish his purposes. A simple ox goad in the hands of an ordinary man, chosen by God, was enough to defeat 600 enemies and bring deliverance to Israel. Shamgar closes out the first generation of judges in Israel. After him would come other deliverers, each with their own unique story, but all following the same pattern, raised up by God in response to the cries of a people who repeatedly turned away from him and suffered the consequences of their unfaithfulness. After Ehud's death, the Israelites once again did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. As a result, they faced a new and powerful enemy. Judges 4:1-2 tells us, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, now that Ehud was dead. So the Lord sold them into the hands of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. Sisera, the commander of his army, was based in Harosheth Hagoyim. Jabin was a powerful Canaanite king. His name means the wise one, and he ruled from Hazor, a city in northern Israel. His army was led by Sisera, who had a significant military advantage over the Israelites. He had 900 iron chariots and had cruelly oppressed the Israelites for 20 years. As stated in Judges 4:3, these iron chariots were like the tanks of that era, powerful weapons against which the Israelites, with their simple arms, had little defense. For 20 long years, the people suffered under this oppression. In this difficult time, God raised up a very different kind of leader, a woman named Deborah. Judges 4:4-5 describes her. Now Deborah, a prophet, the wife of Lapidoth, was leading Israel at that time. She held court under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to have their disputes decided. Deborah was an extraordinary woman for her time. Her name means bee, and like a bee, she was industrious and productive. She held two important roles. She was a prophet, someone who received and delivered messages from God, and a judge, someone who settled disputes and led the people. The palm tree under which she sat became known as the Palm of Deborah, a place where Israelites would come to seek her guidance and decisions. It was a sign of the deep respect she held in a male-dominated society. One day, Deborah summoned a man named Barak from the tribe of Naphtali. Judges 4:6-7 records her words. "The Lord, the God of Israel, commands you, go, take with you 10,000 men of Naphtali and Zebulun, and lead them up to Mount Tabor. I will lead Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and troops to the Kishon River, and give him into your hands." Mount Tabor was a strategic location, offering good visibility over the region. The Kishon River ran through the plain below, a place where Sisera's chariots would have the upper hand unless God intervened. Barak responded to Deborah with an unusual request. Judges 4:8 says, "Barak said to her, 'If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go.'" He wanted the prophetess's presence on the battlefield, perhaps to ensure divine favor. Deborah agreed but made a significant prophecy. Judges 4:9 records, "Certainly I will go with you," said Deborah. "But because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours, for the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. This prophecy is intriguing. The victory over Sisera would come at the hands of a woman. Barak might have thought she was referring to herself, but as we'll see, it would be another woman who fulfilled that role. The army of Israel assembled 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. It was a small number compared to Sisera's forces, especially considering the 900 iron chariots. But they had something far more important. The Lord was with them. When Sisera learned of Israel's mobilization, he gathered his entire army and all his chariots to face Barak. Judges 4:14 captures the decisive moment. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera into your hands. Has not the Lord gone ahead of you?" So Barak went down Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. The battle had begun, and something extraordinary happened. Although it's not mentioned in chapter 4, the Song of Deborah in chapter 5 reveals that God sent a providential storm. Judges 5:4-5 says, "Lord, When you went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook, the heavens poured, the clouds poured down water. The mountains quaked before the Lord, the one of Sinai, before the Lord, the God of Israel. This storm transformed the battlefield. The Kishon River, normally calm, turned into a raging torrent. As Judges 5:21 describes, the river Kishon swept them away, the age-old river, the river Kishon. Sisera's heavy iron chariots, once his greatest advantage, became a liability in the mud and floodwaters. Judges 4:15 sums up the outcome. The Lord routed Sisera, all his chariots and all his army with the sword before Barak, and Sisera got down from his chariot and fled on foot. Israel's victory was decisive, but the story doesn't end there. While his army was being destroyed, Sisera fled on foot and arrived at the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. The Kenites were descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and they generally maintained good relations with both Israel and the surrounding peoples. Judges 4:17 says, "But Sisera fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, because there was an alliance between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the family of Heber the Kenite." Jael welcomed Sisera into her tent, offering him protection. Judges 4:18-19 recounts, Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid." So he entered her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. "I'm thirsty," he said. "Please give me some water." She opened a skin of milk, gave him a drink, and covered him up. Exhausted from battle and fleeing, Sisera asked Jael to stand guard at the entrance while he rested. He soon fell asleep, trusting the hospitality of his host. But Jael had other plans. Judges 4:21 tells what happened. But Jael, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground, and he died. Tent pegs were large. Spikes used to anchor tents. In Jael's hands, it became a deadly weapon. And thus, Deborah's prophecy was fulfilled. The mighty Sisera fell by the hand of a woman. When Barak arrived in pursuit of Sisera, Jael went out to meet him. Judges 4:22 says, "Just then Barak came by in pursuit of Sisera, and Jael went out to meet him. 'Come,' she said, 'I will show you the man you're looking for.' So he went in with her, and there lay Sisera with the tent peg through his temple, dead." The victory was complete. Judges 4:23-24 concludes, "On that day God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites, and the hand of the Israelites pressed harder and harder against Jabin, king of Canaan, until they destroyed him." After the battle, Deborah and Barak sang a song of praise to God for the victory. This song, recorded in Judges 5, is considered one of the oldest poems in the Bible. It opens with these words in Judges 5:1-3. "On that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. When the princes in Israel take the lead, when the people willingly offer themselves, praise the Lord. Hear this, you kings. Listen, you rulers. Even I, will sing to the Lord. I will praise the Lord, the God of Israel, in song." The song celebrates divine victory, honors the volunteers who fought for Israel, and criticizes the tribes that failed to join the battle. It also vividly describes Sisera's death and imagines his mother anxiously waiting for a return that would never come. The result of this great victory was a long period of peace. Judges 5:31 ends the song with these words, "So may all your enemies perish, Lord, but may all who love you be like the sun when it rises in its strength." Then the land had peace for 40 years. For 4 decades under Deborah's leadership, Israel experienced peace and prosperity, free from foreign oppression. Deborah, the only female judge mentioned in the Bible, proved herself every bit as capable as any of the men who ruled Israel. But the familiar cycle of apostasy continued. Judges 6:1 tells us, "The Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and for 7 years he gave them into the hands of the Midianites. The Midianites were a nomadic people descended from Midian, the son of Abraham, by his second wife, Keturah. They allied with the Amalekites and other eastern peoples to raid Israel. Their strategy was devastating. Judges 6:3-5 describes, "Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped on the land and ruined the crops all the way to Gaza, and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep, nor cattle, nor donkeys. They came up with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count them or their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. These invaders didn't come to conquer, but to plunder. They descended during harvest season like a swarm of locusts, destroying everything in sight. This forced the Israelites to hide in mountain caves." Judges 6:6 says, "Midian so impoverished the Israelites that they cried out to the Lord for help. God first responded by sending a prophet to remind the people of the Exodus and his command not to worship the gods of the Amorites. Then the angel of the Lord appeared to a man named Gideon." Judges 6:11-12 tells us, "The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak in Ophrah that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. When the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, 'The Lord is with you, mighty warrior.'" The scene is telling. Gideon was threshing wheat in a wine press, a place used for crushing grapes, not separating grain, trying to hide his work from the Midianites, showing just how deeply fear gripped the people of Israel. The angel's greeting, "Mighty man of valor," seems almost ironic given the circumstances. Gideon responds with an honest question. Judges 6:13 records, "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." The angel doesn't answer Gideon's question directly, but instead gives him a mission. Judges 6:14 says, "The Lord turned to him and said, 'Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?' Gideon protests, pointing out his inadequacy for the task. Judges 6:15 says, "Pardon me, my lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord promises to be with him, but Gideon asks for a sign to confirm that it is truly the Lord speaking to him. He prepares an offering of a young goat and unleavened bread, which the angel consumes with fire from a rock. Judges 6:22 says, "When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, 'Alas, sovereign, Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face.'" That same night, Gideon receives his first mission, to tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Judges 6:25-26 recounts, "That same night the Lord said to him, 'Take the second bull from your father's herd, the one 7 years old. Tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height, using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut. Down, offer the second bull as a burnt offering." Gideon obeyed, but out of fear of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night. In the morning, when the townspeople discovered the destroyed altar, they wanted to kill Gideon. Judges 6:30 says, "The people of the town demanded of Joash, 'Bring out your son. He must die because he has broken down Baal's altar and cut down the Asherah pole beside it.' Joash, Gideon's father, defended him with a clever argument. Judges 6:31-32 records, "But Joash replied to the hostile crowd around him, 'Are you going to plead Baal's cause? Are you trying to save him? Whoever fights for him shall be put to death by morning. If Baal really is a god, he can defend himself when someone breaks down his altar.' So because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, They gave him the name Jerubbaal. That day, saying, "Let Baal contend with him." Jerubbaal means "let Baal contend." This new name served as a constant challenge to the false god who couldn't defend his own altar. After this, the Midianites and their allies crossed the Jordan and camped in the valley of Jezreel. Judges 6:34-35 says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord came on Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, calling them to arms, and also into Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, so that they too went up to meet them. Even with the Spirit of the Lord upon him and an army gathering, Gideon still sought confirmation." Judges 6:36-37 records his request. Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand, as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand, as you said." The next morning, the fleece was soaked, while the surrounding ground was dry. But Gideon asked for yet another sign. Judges 6:39 says, "Then Gideon said to God, 'Do not be angry with me. Let me make just one more request. Allow me one more test with the fleece. This time, make the fleece dry and let the ground be covered with dew.'" God granted this request as well. Finally convinced, Gideon assembled his army at Mount Gilead near the Midianite forces. But God had a surprising plan. Judges 7:2 says, "The Lord said to Gideon, 'You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me.'" God wanted to reduce the size of Gideon's army so that the victory would clearly be seen as divine, not human. First, he told Gideon to dismiss anyone who was fearful. Judges 7:3 states, "Now announce to the army, anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." So 22,000 men left, while 10,000 remained. Even with this drastic reduction, God said the army was still too large. He ordered a test at the water. Judges 7:5-7 explains, "So Gideon took the men down to the water. There the Lord told him, 'Separate those who lap the water with their tongues as a dog laps from those who kneel down to drink.' 300 of them drank from cupped hands, lapping like dogs. All the rest got down on their knees to drink. The Lord said to Gideon, 'With the 300 men that lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Let all the others go home.' Gideon's army was reduced from 32,000 to just 300 men, less than 1% of the original force. These 300 were the most alert, drinking quickly while staying watchful. That night, God told Gideon to go down to the Midianite camp. There he overheard a man telling another about a dream. Judges 7:13-14 says, "Gideon arrived, just as a man was telling a friend his dream. 'I had a dream,' he was saying. 'A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed.' His friend responded, 'This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands.'" This dream and its interpretation gave Gideon courage. He worshipped God and returned to his camp with a plan. Judges 7:16 says, "Dividing the 300 men into 3 companies, he placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside. The plan was simple yet ingenious. The 300 men would surround the Midianite camp in 3 groups. Each man carried a trumpet in one hand and a clay jar with a torch inside in the other. At the appointed moment, they would all break the jars, reveal the torches, and blow the trumpets. Judges 7:19-21 describes the attack. So Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, just after they had changed the guard. They blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. The 3 companies blew the trumpets and smashed the jars. grasping the torches in their left hands and holding in their right hands. The trumpets they were to blow, they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." While each man held his position around the camp, all the Midianites ran, crying out as they fled. The effect was devastating. In the middle of the night, surrounded by 300 blazing torches and the blaring sound of 300 trumpets, the Midianites panicked. They believed they were being attacked by a much larger army. In the confusion, they turned on each other. Judges 7:22 says, "When the 300 trumpets sounded, the Lord caused the men throughout the camp to turn on each other with their swords. The army fled to Beth-shittah towards Zerera, as far as the border of Abel-meholah near Tabath." The victory was total. The Israelites pursued the Midianites, capturing and killing their leaders, Oreb and Zeb, Zebah and Zalmunna. The deliverance was so astonishing that the people wanted to make Gideon their king. In Judges 8:22, we read, "The Israelites said to Gideon, 'Rule over us, you, your son and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian.' But Gideon declined the offer." Judges 8:23 says, "But Gideon told them, 'I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you.' However, Gideon made a request that the people give him the gold earrings they had taken as spoils from the Midianites. With that gold, he made an ephod, a priestly garment, which he placed in his hometown, Ophrah. Unfortunately, this object became an idol to Israel. Judges 8:27 records, "Gideon made the gold into an ephod, which he placed in Ophrah, his town. All Israel prostituted themselves by worshipping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family." Despite this final misstep, Gideon's legacy was largely positive. During his lifetime, Israel enjoyed peace. Judges 8:28 says, "Thus Midian was subdued before the Israelites and did not raise its head again. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace 40 years. Gideon had 70 sons, for he had many wives. He also had a son with a concubine from Shechem, whom he named Abimelech. This son would bring great trouble to Israel after Gideon's death." Judges 8:32-33 concludes Gideon's story. Gideon, son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of his father Joash in Ophrah of the Abizrites. No sooner had Gideon died than the Israelites again prostituted themselves to the Baals. They set up Baal-berith as their god. After Gideon's death, he was also called Jerubbaal, Israel returned to idolatry and forgot the Lord. But this time, the threat didn't come from outside. It came from within, in the form of Abimelech, the son of Gideon's concubine from Shechem. Judges 9:1-2 reports, "Abimelech, son of Jerubbaal, went to his mother's brothers in Shechem and said to them and to all his mother's clan, 'Ask all the citizens of Shechem, which is better for you, to have all 70 of Jerubbaal's sons rule over you, or just one man? Remember, I am your flesh and blood.'" Abimelech appealed to his maternal relatives in Shechem for support. He suggested it would be better to have one ruler himself than 70 of his half-brothers. The men of Shechem sided with Abimelech because they said, "He is our brother." They gave him 70 silver shekels from the temple of Baal-berith, which Abimelech used to hire reckless scoundrels to follow him. What followed was a defining act of brutality. Judges 9:5 says, "He went to his father's home in Ophrah, and on one stone murdered his 70 brothers, the sons of Jerubbaal. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, escaped by hiding. In one bloody day, Abimelech murdered all his half-brothers, except Jotham, the youngest, who managed to hide. This massacre eliminated any rivals to his rule." Judges 9:6 continues, "Then all the citizens of Shechem and Beth-millo gathered beside the great tree at the pillar in Shechem to crown Abimelech king. When Jotham heard about this, he climbed Mount Gerizim and shouted a parable to the people." Judges 9:7 says, When Jotham was told about this, he climbed up on the top of Mount Gerizim and shouted to them, "Listen to me, citizens of Shechem, so that God may listen to you." In Jotham's parable, the trees want to appoint a king. They first approach the olive tree, the fig tree, and the vine, all of which decline, preferring to continue producing their valuable fruit. At last, they turn to the thorn bush, which accepts, but with a warning. "If you really want to anoint me king over you, come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the thorn bush and consume the cedars of Lebanon." The message was unmistakable. Gideon, represented by the fruitful trees, had refused kingship, choosing instead to serve God in his assigned role. Abimelech, the thorn bush, had nothing good to offer, only the threat of destruction. Jotham ended his speech by questioning Shechem's loyalty to Gideon's house, which had fought for them. Judges 9:16-20 says, "Now if you have acted honorably and in good faith when you made Abimelech king, and if you have been fair to Jerubbaal and his family, but if you have not, let fire come out from Abimelech and consume you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from you, the citizens of Shechem and Beth Millo, and consume Abimelech." After proclaiming this prophetic curse, Jotham fled. Judges 9:21 says, "Then Jotham ran away, escaping to Beer, and he lived there because he was afraid of his brother Abimelech." Abimelech ruled over Israel for 3 years. But, as Jotham had foretold, his story would not end well. God himself intervened, as we read in Judges 9:23-24. God stirred up animosity between Abimelech and the citizens of Shechem, so they acted treacherously against Abimelech. This happened to avenge the crime against the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, the shedding of their blood, brought on by their brother Abimelech, who had murdered them, and on the citizens of Shechem, who had helped him kill his brothers. The alliance between Abimelech and Shechem began to fall apart. The men of Shechem set ambushes in the hills to rob travelers, and word of it reached Abimelech. Then a new leader emerged in Shechem. As Judges 9:26 says, "Now Gaal, son of Ebed, moved with his brothers into Shechem, and its citizens put their confidence in him." During a harvest festival held in the temple of their god, the men of Shechem, drunk with wine, cursed Abimelech. Gaal openly challenged his rule. Judges 9:28-29 records, "Then Gaal, son of Ebed, said, 'Who is Abimelech, and why should we Shechemites be subject to him? Isn't he Jerubbaal's son? And isn't Zebul his deputy? Serve the people of Hamor, Shechem's father. Why should we serve Abimelech? If only these people were under my command, I would get rid of him. I would say to Abimelech, call out your whole army.'" Zebul, the governor of the city and loyal to Abimelech, heard Gaal's words and sent messengers to warn Abimelech of the rebellion. That night, Abimelech marched with his army and set up an ambush against the city. Judges 9:39-40 tells us, "So Gaal led out the citizens of Shechem and fought Abimelech. Abimelech chased him, and many fell wounded in the battle all the way to the city gate. The next day, as the people left the city to work in the fields, Abimelech launched a surprise attack. He divided his army into 3 companies. 2 attacked the people in the fields, while the 3rd, led by Abimelech himself, took control of the city gate. The battle raged all day. Judges 9:45 says, "All that day Abimelech pressed his attack against the city until he had captured it and killed its people. Then he destroyed the city and scattered salt over it." Salt was a symbol of barrenness. By sowing Shechem with salt, Abimelech was signaling that the place was to remain uninhabitable and unfruitful. When the people of the Tower of Shechem heard what had happened, they took refuge in the stronghold of the temple of El-Berith. Abimelech didn't hesitate to attack them too. Judges 9:48-49 recounts, "Abimelech went up Mount Zalmon with all his men. There he took an axe, cut off some branches and lifted them to his shoulders. He said to the men with him, 'What you have seen me do, hurry and do the same.' So all the men cut branches and followed Abimelech. They piled them against the stronghold and set it on fire with the people still inside. So all the people in the tower of Shechem, about 1,000 men and women, died. Next, Abimelech marched against the city of Thebez and laid siege to it. In the middle of the city stood a strong tower where all the townspeople took refuge. Judges 9:52 says, Abimelech went to the tower and attacked it, but as he approached the entrance to set it on fire, it was here that Jotham's prophecy finally came to pass. Judges 9:53 says, a woman dropped an upper millstone on his head and cracked his skull. Sensing death was near, Abimelech called for his armor-bearer. Judges 9:54 recounts, hurriedly he called to his armor-bearer, draw your sword and kill me, so that they can't say, a woman killed him. So his servant ran him through, and he died. This humiliating end, fatally wounded by a woman and begging to be killed by his own servant to avoid disgrace, marked the final chapter in Abimelech's life. Judges 9:56-57 concludes, thus God repaid the wickedness that Abimelech had done to his father by murdering his 70 brothers. God also made the people of Shechem pay for all their wickedness. The curse of Jotham, son of Jerubbaal, came on them. Abimelech's story stands as a stark warning against unchecked ambition and violence. Unlike the judges whom God raised to deliver Israel, Abimelech proclaimed himself king and ruled through brutality. His 3-year reign of terror ended as violently as it began, fulfilling the truth of the saying, those who live by the sword die by the sword. After Abimelech, 2 lesser-known judges led Israel, Tola, who judged for 23 years, and Jair, who judged for 22. But the familiar pattern soon returned. Judges 10:6 says, again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. They served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, and the gods of Aram, Sidon, Moab, the Ammonites, and the Philistines. Because the Israelites forsook the Lord and no longer served him, this widespread idolatry led to severe judgment. Judges 10:7-8 tells us, the Lord's anger burned against Israel so that he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and the Ammonites. That year they shattered and crushed the Israelites. For 18 years they oppressed all the Israelites on the east side of the Jordan in Gilead, the land of the Amorites. For 18 long years, the Ammonites oppressed the Israelites in Gilead, east of the Jordan River. Finally, Israel cried out to the Lord, confessing their sin. Judges 10:15-16 records, but the Israelites said to the Lord, we have sinned. Do with us whatever you think best, but please rescue us now. Then they got rid of the foreign gods among them and served the Lord, and he could bear Israel's misery no longer. The Ammonites had gathered in Gilead, and the Israelites assembled in Mizpah. The leaders of Gilead were looking for someone to lead the fight against the Ammonites. Judges 10:18 says, the people, the leaders of Gilead, said to each other, whoever begins the fight against the Ammonites will be head over all who live in Gilead. It was at this critical moment that Jephthah appeared, a man whose life story was marked by rejection. Judges 11:1-2 introduces him like this, Jephthah the Gileadite was a mighty warrior, but he was the son of a prostitute. Gilead was the father of Jephthah. Gilead's wife also bore him sons, and when they were grown up, they drove Jephthah away. You are not going to get any inheritance in our family, they said, because you are the son of another woman. Rejected by his half-brothers and cast out from his father's house, Jephthah settled in the land of Tob, where he became the leader of a group of worthless men, likely mercenaries or outlaws. Despite his past, Jephthah developed leadership skills and gained a reputation as a brave warrior. When the Ammonites attacked Israel, the elders of Gilead came to find Jephthah. Judges 11:6-7 recounts, come, they said, be our commander, so we can fight the Ammonites. Jephthah said to them, "Didn't you hate me and drive me from my father's house? Why do you come to me now when you're in trouble?" Jephthah was skeptical of their intentions. The very people who had rejected him now wanted him to lead them. The elders insisted and offered him permanent leadership over Gilead in exchange for his help. Judges 11:9-10 states, Jephthah answered, "Suppose you take me back to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gives them to me. Will I really be your head?" The elders of Gilead replied, "The Lord is our witness. We will certainly do as you say." Before going into battle, Jephthah attempted a diplomatic solution. He sent messengers to the king of the Ammonites, asking why he was attacking the land of Israel. The king replied that Israel had taken his people's land when they came out of Egypt, and he now sought to reclaim it peacefully. Jephthah responded with a detailed history lesson, explaining that Israel had not taken land from the Ammonites, but from the Amorites, after King Sihon had refused to let them pass peacefully. Judges 11:23-24 sums up his argument. "Now, since the Lord, the God of Israel, has driven the Amorites out before his people Israel, what right have you to take it over? Will you not take what your god Chemosh gives you? Likewise, whatever the Lord our God has given us, we will possess." Jephthah concluded by pointing out that Israel had lived in that land for 300 years without dispute. Judges 11:27 records his final words to the Ammonite king. "I have not wronged you, but you are doing me wrong by waging war against me. Let the Lord, the judge, decide the dispute this day between the Israelites and the Ammonites." The king of the Ammonites ignored Jephthah's message, and war became inevitable. It was then that Jephthah made a rash vow that would alter his life forever. Judges 11:30-31 says, "And Jephthah made a vow to the Lord, 'If you give the Ammonites into my hands, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return in triumph from the Ammonites will be the Lord's, and I will sacrifice it as a burnt offering.'" This vow reveals a troubling aspect of Jephthah's faith. He seemed to believe he could bargain with God or secure victory through a promise. It also shows a flawed understanding of God's law, which explicitly forbade human sacrifice. With the Spirit of the Lord upon him, Jephthah defeated the Ammonites completely. Judges 11:32-33 records, "Then Jephthah went over to fight the Ammonites, and the Lord gave them into his hands. He devastated 20 towns from Aroer to the vicinity of Minnith, as far as Abel-Keramim. Thus Israel subdued Ammon." But the victory turned to heartbreak when Jephthah returned home. Judges 11:34-35 recounts, "When Jephthah returned to his home in Mizpah, who should come out to meet him but his daughter, dancing to the sound of timbrels? She was an only child. Except for her, he had neither son nor daughter. When he saw her, he tore his clothes and cried, 'Oh no, my daughter! You have brought me down, and I am devastated. I have made a vow to the Lord that I cannot break.'" Jephthah's only child was the first to greet him after his victory. The horror that overcame him shows he never expected a human, let alone his daughter, to be the object of his vow. He tore his clothes in anguish, yet felt bound to fulfill his promise to God. His daughter's response displays remarkable nobility. Judges 11:36 says, "My father," she replied, "you have given your word to the Lord. Do to me just as you promised. Now that the Lord has avenged you of your enemies, the Ammonites." She only asked for 2 months to mourn her virginity in the mountains with her friends, which Jephthah granted. Judges 11:39-40 concludes the story. After the 2 months, she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed. And she was a virgin. From this comes the Israelite tradition that each year the young women of Israel go out for 4 days to commemorate the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. There is debate among scholars as to whether Jephthah actually sacrificed his daughter or instead dedicated her to perpetual virginity in service to God. The texts focus on her virginity, and the annual mourning tradition leads some to believe she lived out her life consecrated to God. Others argue the text plainly says burnt offering and that the vow was carried out literally. What's clear is the tragic result of a reckless vow and Jephthah's theological confusion blending faith in the true God with pagan practices like human sacrifice. Jephthah's story didn't end with his vow, however. After the victory over the Ammonites, he faced another challenge, the jealousy of the Ephraimites. Judges 12:1 says, "The Ephraimite forces were called out, and they crossed over to Zaphon. They said to Jephthah, 'Why did you go to fight the Ammonites without calling us to go with you? We're going to burn down your house over your head.' Jephthah responded that he had called them, but they did not come. The tension escalated into a civil war. Judges 12:6 recounts how Jephthah's men identified the Ephraimite fugitives. Then they said to him, 'Say now Shibboleth,' but he said Sibboleth, for he could not pronounce it correctly. Then they seized him and killed him at the fords of the Jordan. At that time, 42,000 of the Ephraimites fell. The word Shibboleth means stream or ear of grain. The Ephraimites couldn't pronounce the sh sound and would say Sibboleth instead. This linguistic test became a deadly way to identify the enemy. That's where the modern term shibboleth comes from. It refers to a word or phrase that identifies someone as belonging to or not belonging to a particular group. Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years. Before his death, Judges 12:7 records, Jephthah judged Israel 6 years. Then Jephthah the Gileadite died and was buried in one of the towns of Gilead. After Jephthah, the Bible briefly mentions 3 more judges who led Israel during times of relative peace. They're referred to as minor judges, not because they were less important, but because the biblical text gives fewer details about them. The first of these was Ibzan of Bethlehem. Judges 12:8-10 tells us, "After him Ibzan of Bethlehem judged Israel. He had 30 sons, and gave his 30 daughters in marriage outside his clan, and brought in 30 daughters from outside for his sons. He judged Israel 7 years. Then Ibzan died and was buried in Bethlehem." Ibzan appears to have been a wealthy and influential man, able to arrange marriages for his 60 children. The fact that he married off his daughters outside and brought wives from outside for his sons suggests alliances with other families or clans, likely as a strategy to strengthen peace and unity within Israel. After Ibzan came Elon, from the tribe of Zebulun. Judges 12:11-12 says simply, "After him, Elon the Zebulunite judged Israel, and he judged Israel 10 years. Then Elon the Zebulunite died and was buried in Aijalon in the land of Zebulun." Almost nothing is said about Elon aside from his tribe and the length of his leadership. This brevity likely points to a relatively quiet time, without major conflicts or noteworthy events. The last of the minor judges mentioned in this section is Abdon. Judges 12:13-15 records, "After him, Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, judged Israel. He had 40 sons and 30 grandsons who rode on 70 donkeys, and he judged Israel 8 years. Then Abdon, the son of Hillel, the Pirathonite, died and was buried in Pirathon in the land of Ephraim, in the hill country of the Amalekites. Like Ibzan, Abdon seemed to be a prosperous man with a large family. The detail that his sons and grandsons rode 70 donkeys is significant. Riding donkeys was a sign of nobility and high social status at that time. The reference to the hill country of the Amalekites is intriguing, since the Amalekites were traditional enemies of Israel. It was likely a region formerly inhabited by Amalekites that had been conquered by Israel. Among these minor judges, the Bible also mentions Tola, who judged Israel for 23 years. Judges 10:1-2 says, After Abimelech, there arose to save Israel Tola the son of Puah, the son of Dodo, a man of Issachar. He lived in Shamir in the hill country of Ephraim. He judged Israel 23 years. Then he died and was buried in Shamir. And also Jair, who judged for 22 years. Judges 10:3-5 records. After him arose Jair the Gileadite, who judged Israel 22 years. He had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys, and they had 30 towns, which are called Havoth-Jair to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Jair died and was buried in Kaman. The name Havoth-Jair means villages of Jair, showing that this judge left a territorial legacy in Israel. The fact that his 30 sons rode 30 donkeys and ruled 30 towns speaks to his status and influence. These minor judges played an important role in Israel's history, maintaining peace and order during their time of leadership. Even though the Bible doesn't give many details about their specific achievements, they were instruments of God in preserving the nation during the times between major crises and deliverances. The mention of these lesser-known judges reminds us that not everyone whom God uses has a detailed story recorded in Scripture. Many serve faithfully during times of relative calm, away from the spotlight of great battles and miracles. Even so, their service is valuable in God's eyes and essential for the continuity of His people. Once again, the people of Israel turned away from God. As a result, they faced a new oppressor. Judges 13:1 tells us, "The children of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord gave them into the hand of the Philistines for 40 years. The Philistines were a strong people who lived along the southwestern coast of Canaan. They had well-organized cities, mastered ironworking, and posed a constant threat to Israel. For 40 long years, the Israelites suffered under their rule. During this time of oppression, there was a man named Manoah from the tribe of Dan, whose wife could not have children. Judges 13:2-3 says, "There was a certain man of Zorah, of the tribe of Dan, whose name was Manoah. His wife was barren and had borne no children, and the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, 'Behold, you are barren and have not borne children, but you shall conceive and bear a son.'" This announcement to a barren woman follows a pattern we see throughout the Bible, with Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, Hannah, and later Elizabeth. God often chooses to do the impossible to reveal His power. The angel gave the woman specific instructions. Judges 13:4-5 continues, "Now therefore be careful and drink no wine or strong drink, and eat nothing unclean. For behold, you shall conceive and bear a son. No razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazirite to God from the womb, and he shall begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines." A Nazirite was someone who made a special vow of separation to God. Typically, this vow was temporary and voluntary, but in the case of the promised child, it would be a lifelong commitment, starting even before birth. The Nazirite law described in Numbers 6 included 3 main restrictions: no drinking wine or any fermented drink, no contact with dead bodies, and no cutting of the hair. The uncut hair served as the visible sign of this vow. The woman ran to tell her husband about the mysterious visitor. Manoah prayed, asking that the angel return to give further instructions on how to raise the child. God answered his prayer, and the angel appeared again to the woman while she was alone in the field. She quickly called her husband. When Manoah arrived, he asked how they should raise the boy. The angel simply repeated the earlier instructions. Not realizing he was an angel, Manoah wanted to show hospitality to the visitor. Judges 13:15-16 says, "Then Manoah said to the angel of the Lord, 'Please stay, so we may prepare a young goat for you.' The angel of the Lord replied, 'Even if you detain me, I will not eat any of your food. But if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord.' Manoah did not realize that it was the angel of the Lord. Manoah asked for the visitor's name but received a mysterious reply. Judges 13:18 records, "The angel of the Lord said to him, 'Why do you ask my name, seeing it is wonderful?' Manoah then prepared a young goat and a grain offering and offered them on a rock to the Lord." What happened next was astonishing. Judges 13:19-20 recounts, "Manoah took the young goat and the grain offering and offered them on a rock to the Lord. And the angel did something amazing as Manoah and his wife watched. As the flame blazed up from the altar toward heaven, the angel of the Lord ascended in the flame. Seeing this, Manoah and his wife fell with their faces to the ground. It was only then that Manoah realized they had seen an angel of the Lord. He feared for their lives, as there was a belief that seeing God face to face could be fatal. But his wife reassured him, saying that if God intended to kill them, he wouldn't have accepted their offering or revealed such things to them. The angel's promise was fulfilled. Judges 13:24-25 says, "The woman gave birth to a son and named him Samson. He grew, and the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to stir him while he was in Mahane-dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. Samson grew up with the Spirit of the Lord upon him, but soon revealed a conflicting side to his character." Judges 14:1-3 recounts, "Samson went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, 'I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife.' His father and mother replied, 'Isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife?' But Samson said to his father, 'Get her for me. She's the one I want.' This request was problematic for several reasons. First, God had forbidden marriages with the pagan peoples of Canaan, Deuteronomy 7:3. Second, the Philistines were oppressing Israel at the time. Third, as a Nazirite, Samson was supposed to be set apart for God. But the Bible reveals a deeper purpose behind this apparent disobedience. Judges 14:4 explains, "His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over Israel." On the way to Timnah to meet the woman, Samson had a startling encounter. Judges 14:5-6 tells us, "Samson went down to Timnah with his father and mother. As they approached the vineyards of Timnah, suddenly a young lion came roaring toward him. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him, so that he tore the lion apart with his bare hands, as easily as one might tear a young goat. But he told neither his father nor his mother what he had done." This was the first sign of Samson's supernatural strength, a gift from God to fulfill his purpose of delivering Israel. Interestingly, Samson told no one about this feat, not even his parents. Sometime later, when he returned to marry the Philistine woman, Samson had another surprise. Judges 14:8-9 says, "Sometime later, when he went back to marry her, he turned aside to look at the lion's carcass, and in it he saw a swarm of bees and some honey. He scooped out the honey with his hands and ate it as he went along. When he rejoined his parents, he gave them some and they too ate it. But he did not tell them that he had taken the honey from the lion's carcass. As a Nazirite, Samson was not supposed to touch dead bodies. Yet here he not only touched the carcass of the lion, but also ate honey from within it. This marked a pattern of disregarding the rules of his vow, even as God continued to use him. During the wedding feast, Samson posed a riddle to his Philistine companions. Judges 14:12-14 records, "Let me tell you a riddle," Samson said to them. "If you can give me the answer within the 7 days of the feast, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't tell me the answer, you must give me the same." They agreed and asked him to tell the riddle. He said, "Out of the eater came something to eat, and out of the strong came something sweet." For 3 days they could not give the answer, unable to solve it. The Philistines threatened Samson's wife. Judges 14:15 says, "On the fourth day, they said to Samson's wife, 'Coax your husband into explaining the riddle for us, or we will burn you and your father's household to death. Did you invite us here to steal our property?' Samson's wife wept and pressed him until he finally gave in on the seventh day. When the Philistines gave him the answer, Samson immediately knew he'd been betrayed. Judges 14:18 recounts his bitter response. Before sunset on the seventh day, the men of the town said to him, 'What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?' Samson said to them, 'If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle.' To pay off the bet, Samson did something terrible. Judges 14:19 says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. He went down to Ashkelon, struck down 30 of their men, stripped them of everything and gave their clothes to those who had explained the riddle. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's house. Samson abandoned his wife and went back to his parents' home. In the meantime, the woman's father gave her in marriage to Samson's best man. When Samson later returned to visit his wife, he found out what had happened. Judges 15:1-2 recounts, "Later on, at the time of wheat harvest, Samson took a young goat and went to visit his wife. He said, 'I'm going to my wife's room.' But her father would not let him go in. 'I was so sure you hated her,' he said, 'that I gave her to your companion. Isn't her younger sister more attractive? Take her instead.' Enraged, Samson decided to take revenge on the Philistines. Judges 15:4-5 outlines his plan. So he went out and caught 300 foxes and tied them tail to tail in pairs. He then fastened a torch to every pair of tails, lit the torches, and let the foxes loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. He burned up the shocks and standing grain, together with the vineyards and olive groves. When the Philistines found out Samson had done this because his father-in-law had given his wife to someone else, they responded with brutal revenge. Judges 15:6 says, "When the Philistines asked, 'Who did this?' they were told, 'Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite, because his wife was given to his companion.' So the Philistines went up and burned her and her father to death." The cycle of violence escalated. Samson vowed to get revenge for his wife's death. Judges 15:7-8 reports, "Samson said to them, 'Since you've acted like this, I swear that I won't stop until I get my revenge on you.' He attacked them viciously and slaughtered many of them. Then he went down and stayed in a cave in the rock of Etam. The Philistines gathered an army and set up camp in Judah, looking for Samson. Fearing for their safety, the men of Judah decided to hand Samson over. Judges 15:11-13 tells us, "Then 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave in the rock of Etam and said to Samson, 'Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What have you done to us?' He answered, 'I merely did to them what they did to me.' They said to him, 'We've come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines.' Samson said, 'Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves.' 'Agreed,' they answered. 'We will. Only tie you up and hand you over to them. We will not kill you.' So they bound him with 2 new ropes and led him up from the rock. When the Philistines saw Samson tied up, they rushed toward him shouting with joy. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson once again. Judges 15:14-16 describes what happened next. As he approached Lehi, the Philistines came toward him, shouting. The Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon him. The ropes on his arms became like charred flax, and the bindings dropped from his hands. Finding a fresh jawbone of a donkey, he grabbed it and struck down 1,000 men. Then Samson said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." The victory left him completely exhausted, and he cried out to God. Judges 15:18-19 says, "Because he was very thirsty, he cried out to the Lord, 'You have given your servant this great victory. Must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?' Aye, Then God opened up a hollow place in Lehi, and water came out of it. When Samson drank, his strength returned and he revived. So the spring was called En-Hakkore, and it is still there in Lehi. Samson led Israel for 20 years during the time of Philistine rule, but his story didn't end there. Even as a judge of Israel, Samson continued his pattern of involvement with Philistine women. Judges 16:1 says, "One day Samson went to Gaza where he saw a prostitute. He went in to spend the night with her. When the people of Gaza learned that Samson was there, they surrounded the city and waited at the gate all night, planning to kill him at dawn. But Samson got up at midnight, tore the city gates loose, posts and all, lifted them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron, once again showing his extraordinary strength. After that, Samson fell in love with another Philistine woman. Judges 16:4 says, "Sometime later he fell in love with a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah." The Philistine leaders saw this new relationship as a golden opportunity to capture their enemy. Judges 16:5 tells us, "The rulers of the Philistines went to her and said, 'See if you can lure him into showing you the secret of his great strength and how we can overpower him so we may tie him up and subdue him. Each one of us will give you 1,100 shekels of silver.' It was a tempting offer, 5,500 silver coins in total, a fortune at the time. Delilah agreed and began working to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. Judges 16:6 says, "So Delilah said to Samson, 'Tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued.' Samson lied, saying that if he were tied with 7 fresh bowstrings, animal tendons, he would become as weak as any other man. She tied him up while he slept and shouted, 'The Philistines are upon you, Samson!' But he snapped the cords easily. Realizing she had been tricked, Delilah tried again. Judges 16:10-12 says, "Then Delilah said to Samson, 'You have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied.' He said, 'If anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man.' So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then she called, 'Samson, the Philistines are upon you.' But he snapped the ropes off his arms as if they were threads. She tried a third time. Samson told yet another lie, that if the 7 braids of his hair were woven into a loom, he'd lose his strength. Once again, when she tested it, he broke free easily. Finally, Delilah used all her powers of persuasion. Judges 16:15-16 says, "Then she said to him, 'How can you say, I love you, when your heart is not with me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and have not told me the secret of your great strength.' With such nagging, she prodded him day after day until he was sick to death of it. Pressed beyond endurance, Samson finally revealed his secret. Judges 16-17 records. So he told her everything. 'No razor has ever been used on my head,' he said, 'because I have been a Nazirite dedicated to God from my mother's womb. If my head was shaved, my strength would leave me, and I would become as weak as any other man.' Delilah realized this time he had told her the truth and sent for the Philistine rulers. Judges 16:19 describes the moment of betrayal. After putting him to sleep on her lap, she called for someone to shave off the 7 braids of his hair, and so began to subdue him, and his strength left him. When Delilah shouted that the Philistines were coming, Samson woke up confident, just as before, but something had changed. Judges 16:20 says, "Then she called, 'Samson, the Philistines are upon you.' He awoke from his sleep and thought, 'I'll go out as before and shake myself free.' But he did not know that the Lord had left him. This is one of the saddest lines in the Bible. He did not know that the Lord had left him. Samson had repeatedly broken his Nazirite vow and had now allowed his hair, the outward sign of his consecration, to be cut. Samson's strength was never in his hair, but in the presence of the Spirit of God that empowered him to fulfill his calling. The hair was only the visible symbol of his commitment to God. The Philistines captured him, gouged out his eyes, and took him to Gaza. Judges 16:21 reports, "Then the Philistines seized him, gouged out his eyes, and took him down to Gaza. Binding him with bronze shackles, they set him to grinding grain in the prison." The mighty hero of Israel, once so powerful, was now blind, shackled, and reduced to doing the work of a beast, grinding grain in prison. It was a terrible fall for someone who had been set apart for God since before birth. But Samson's story wasn't over yet. Judges 16:22 adds a small but deeply meaningful detail, but the hair on his head began to grow again after it had been shaved. The regrowth of his hair symbolized a possible renewal of Samson's commitment to God. In prison, far from the temptations that had led him astray, Samson may have had time to reflect on his life and turn back to God in repentance. The Philistines decided to celebrate their victory over Samson with a grand feast in honor of their god Dagon. Judges 16:23-24 says, "Now the rulers of the Philistines assembled to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon their god and to celebrate, saying, 'Our God has delivered Samson, our enemy, into our hands.' When the people saw him, they praised their God, saying, 'Our God has delivered our enemy into our hands, the one who laid waste our land and multiplied our slain.'" At the height of the celebration, someone had an idea to add to the entertainment. Judges 16:25 says, "While they were in high spirits, they shouted, 'Bring out Samson to entertain us.' So they called Samson out of the prison, and he performed for them. When they stood him among the pillars, picture the scene, the temple of Dagon, packed with about 3,000 people on the roof and inside, all celebrating their triumph over their enemy. And in the middle of it all, Samson, blind and humiliated, brought out to be mocked and ridiculed. But Samson had a plan. He asked the servant who was leading him, "Put me where I can feel the pillars that support the temple, so that I may lean against them." The servant agreed, unaware of what was about to unfold. Then Samson prayed his final prayer. Judges 16:28 records, "Then Samson prayed to the Lord, 'Sovereign Lord, remember me. Please, God, strengthen me just once more, and let me with one blow get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes.'" Samson asked for strength for one final act of vengeance against the Philistines, and God heard his prayer. Judges 16:29-30 concludes the story. Then Samson reached toward the 2 central pillars on which the temple stood. Bracing himself against them, his right hand on one and his left hand on the other, Samson said, "Let me die with the Philistines." Then he pushed with all his might, and down came the temple on the rulers and all the people in it. Thus he killed many more when he died than while he lived. Despite all his failures, Samson fulfilled his divine purpose to begin delivering Israel from Philistine oppression. His family came to retrieve his body and buried him in his father's tomb. Judges 16:31 says, "Then his brothers and his father's whole family went down to get him. They brought him back and buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of Manoah, his father. He had led Israel 20 years. The book of Judges doesn't end with Samson's story. The final chapters, 17-21, depict the moral and spiritual collapse of Israel during that time. These events likely took place at various times throughout the era of the Judges, not necessarily after Samson. One phrase, repeated several times in these final chapters, sums up the situation. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. We see this expression in Judges 17:6, 18:1, 19:1, and 21:25. The first story of this epilogue involves a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim. Judges 17:1-5 says, Now a man named Micah from the hill country of Ephraim said to his mother, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and about which I heard you utter a curse, I have that silver with me. I took it." Then his mother said, "The Lord bless you, my son." When he returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother, she said, "I solemnly consecrate my silver to the Lord for my son to make an image overlaid with silver. I will give it back to you." So after he returned the silver to his mother, she took 200 shekels and gave them to a silversmith, who used them to make the idol. And it was put in Micah's house. Now this man Micah had a shrine, and he made an ephod and some household gods, and installed one of his sons as his priest. This story reveals several serious problems. Micah had stolen money from his own mother. After confessing, his mother used part of the money to make an idol. Micah then set up a private shrine in his home, and without any divine authority, appointed his own son as a priest. All of this went against God's law, which forbade idols, and stated that only descendants of Aaron, from the tribe of Levi, could serve as priests. The situation became even more complicated when a young Levite from Bethlehem arrived at Micah's house. Judges 17:7-10 says, "Now there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah, who was a Levite and was staying temporarily there. This man left the town of Bethlehem in Judah to settle wherever he could find a place. As he journeyed, he came to the hill country of Ephraim, to the house of Micah. Micah asked him, 'Where are you from?' He replied, 'I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm looking for a place to stay.' Then Micah said to him, 'Live with me and be my father and priest, and I'll give you 10 shekels of silver a year, your clothes and your food.' So the Levite agreed to stay. Although this Levite was from the right tribe, he was willing to serve as a private priest in an idolatrous shrine in exchange for payment. Micah was pleased with the arrangement, thinking he now had God's favor. Judges 17:13 reveals his misguided thinking. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." The story continues in chapter 18, when the tribe of Dan, which had not yet fully conquered its territory, sent 5 spies to find a new place to settle. These men came to Micah's house and recognized the voice of the young Levite. Judges 18:3-4 says, While they were at Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, so they went over and asked him, 'Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What is your business here?' He told them, 'This is what Micah has done for me. He hired me, and I have become his priest.' The spies then asked the Levite to inquire of God whether their journey would be successful, and he gave them a favorable answer. Judges 18:6 says, the priest answered them, 'Go in peace. Your journey has the Lord's approval.' The spies traveled on to Laish, also called Leshem, a distant city where the people lived peacefully and securely. They returned to their tribe and reported that the land was good and the people defenseless, an easy target. Judges 18:9-10 records their words, 'Get up, let's attack them. We've seen the land and it is very good. Why wait? Don't hesitate to go and take possession of it. When you arrive, you'll find a peaceful people and a spacious land. God has given it into your hands, a place lacking nothing on earth.' 600 armed men from the tribe of Dan marched to conquer Laish. On the way, they stopped at Micah's house. The 5 spies told the others about the religious objects in the house. Judges 18:17-18 says, the 5 men who had spied out the land entered the house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the cast idol, while the priest stood at the entrance with the 600 armed men. When the others went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household gods, and the cast idol, the priest said to them, 'What are you doing?' The Danites persuaded the Levite to go with them, telling him it would be better to be a priest for an entire tribe than for just one household. Judges 18:20 shows how quickly the Levite shifted his loyalty. The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod, the household gods, and the carved image, and went along with the people. Micah and his neighbors pursued the Danites, but realizing they were outnumbered, they turned back. The Danites reached Laish, conquered the city, killed its inhabitants, and rebuilt it under the name Dan. Judges 18:30-31 concludes the story. The Danites set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan son of Gershom, the son of Moses, and his sons were priests for the tribe of Dan until the time of the captivity of the land. They continued to use the idol Micah had made all the time the house of God was in Shiloh. This story shows how idolatry spread throughout Israel. A private idolatrous shrine became the center of worship for an entire tribe, founded with stolen objects and led by a Levite who had abandoned his true calling. The second story in the epilogue is even more disturbing. Judges 19:1 begins, "In those days, when there was no king in Israel, a Levite living in the remote hill country of Ephraim took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. This unnamed Levite had a concubine who was unfaithful to him and returned to her father's house in Bethlehem. The Levite went to bring her back, and her father welcomed him, urging him to stay several days. Eventually, the Levite left with his concubine and a servant, reaching the outskirts of Jebus, Jerusalem, at the end of the day. The servant suggested spending the night in Jebus, but the Levite refused to stay in a city of foreigners. Judges 19:11-12 says, "When they were near Jebus and the day was almost gone, the servant said to his master, 'Come, let's stop at this city of the Jebusites and spend the night.' But his master replied, 'No, we won't go into a city of foreigners who are not Israelites. We'll continue on to Gibeah.' They continued to Gibeah, a city of Benjamin, but no one offered them hospitality for the night, a major cultural failure at the time. Finally, an old man from the hill country of Ephraim, now living in Gibeah, saw them in the square and invited them into his home. That night, something horrific happened. Judges 19:22 recounts, "While they were enjoying themselves, some wicked men of the city, sons of Belial, surrounded the house. They pounded on the door and shouted to the old man who owned the house, 'Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him.' It was a situation similar to that of Sodom in the days of Lot. The old man tried to protect his guest by offering his own daughter and the Levite's concubine. Judges 19:24-25 recounts, "Look, here are my virgin daughter and his concubine. I will bring them out to you now, and you can abuse them and do to them whatever you wish. But as for this man, do not commit such an outrageous act." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them, and they raped her and abused her throughout the night, and at dawn they let her go. In the morning, the Levite found his concubine collapsed at the door of the house. Judges 19:28 says, "He said to her, 'Get up, let's go.' But there was no answer. Then he put her on his donkey, and the man set out for home. When he got home, the Levite did something shocking. Judges 19:29 records, "When he reached home, he took a knife and cut up his concubine, limb by limb, into 12 parts, and sent them throughout the territory of Israel." This brutal act was meant to shock the nation and provoke a response to the horrific violence that had taken place in Gibeah. And it worked. Judges 19:30 says, "Everyone who saw it said, 'Nothing like this has ever been seen or done, not since the day the Israelites came up out of Egypt. Just imagine. We must do something. Speak up.'" The tribes of Israel gathered at Mizpah to decide how to respond to the crime. The Levite gave his version of events, conveniently omitting that he himself had handed over his concubine to the attackers. Judges 24:5 says, "So the Levite, the husband of the murdered woman, answered, 'I and my concubine came to Gibeah in Benjamin to spend the night. During the night, The men of Gibeah came after me and surrounded the house, intending to kill me. They raped my concubine, and she died. Israel demanded that the tribe of Benjamin hand over the criminals from Gibeah, but they refused. Judges 20:13-14 says, "Now then turn those wicked men of Gibeah over to us so that we may put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." But the Benjamites would not listen to their fellow Israelites. From their towns, they came together at Gibeah to fight against the Israelites. Benjamin assembled an army of 26,700 men, including 700 select warriors who were left-handed and exceptionally skilled with slings. Judges 20:16 notes, "Among all these soldiers, there were 700 select troops who were left-handed, each of whom could sling a stone at a hair and not miss. The rest of Israel gathered 400,000 armed men. In the first 2 days of battle, Benjamin defeated Israel, killing 40,000 men. The tribes wept before the Lord, asking whether they should continue fighting. On the third day, they changed tactics and set ambushes around Gibeah. As the battle began, the Benjamites confidently pursued the Israelites, who pretended to flee. This drew the Benjaminite forces away from the city, allowing the ambushers to enter and set it on fire. Judges 20:40-41 recounts, "The smoke began to rise from the city in a column, and the Benjamites turned and saw the whole city going up in smoke. Then the Israelites turned back against them, and the Benjamites were terrified because they realized that disaster had come upon them. The battle ended in a devastating defeat for Benjamin." Judges 20:44-46 states, "That day, 18,000 Benjamite soldiers fell, all valiant fighters. In total, 25,000 sword-wielding Benjamite warriors died that day, all of them strong and brave. Only 600 men from Benjamin survived, fleeing into the wilderness and hiding at the rock of Rimmon for 4 months. The other tribes attacked Benjamin's towns, killing everyone, men, women, and children, and burning the cities. Later, Israel regretted having nearly wiped out one of its own tribes." Judges 21:3 records, "They said, 'Lord God of Israel, why has this happened to Israel? Why should one tribe be missing from Israel today?' They faced a dilemma. They had sworn not to give their daughters in marriage to the Benjamites, but now wanted to preserve the tribe. They discovered that no one from Jabesh Gilead had attended the assembly at Mizpah, so they sent 12,000 men to destroy the city, with specific instructions. Judges 21:11-12 says, "This is what you are to do. Kill every male and every woman who has slept with a man." And they found among the people of Jabesh Gilead 400 young women who had never slept with a man, and they brought them to the camp at Shiloh in Canaan. These 400 young women were given to the surviving Benjamite men as wives. But there was still not enough for all. For the remaining 200, Israel's leaders proposed a plan. During a festival in Shiloh, the remaining Benjamites would hide in the vineyards. When the young women came out to dance, each man was to seize one and take her as a wife. This plan circumvented their oath, as they were not technically giving their daughters. The women were being taken. Judges 21:23 says, "So that is what the Benjamites did. While the young women were dancing, each man caught one and carried her off to be his wife. Then they returned to their inheritance and rebuilt the towns and settled in them." The book of Judges ends with a grim statement that sums up the entire era. Judges 21:25 declares, "In those days there was no king. In Israel, everyone did what was right in his own eyes." This final verse highlights the central issue of the time. The absence of centralized leadership and the rejection of God's moral standards led to a cycle of apostasy, oppression, and violence. The book ends by setting the stage for the monarchy to come, beginning with King Saul and reaching its peak under King David. The book of Judges contains important theological lessons that go beyond its historical context. The first and most obvious one is about the consequences of disobedience and unfaithfulness to God. Time and again, the people of Israel turned away from the Lord to follow the gods of the surrounding nations, and time and again they suffered the consequences. Judges 2:11-13 establishes this pattern. Then the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals. They abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the peoples around them and bowed down to them. They provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served Baal and the Ashtoreths. Israel's idolatry wasn't just about misguided religious practices. It was a betrayal of their covenant with God, comparable to adultery. The prophets would later use this same image to describe the relationship between God and Israel. God as the faithful husband and Israel as the unfaithful wife. Still, another key theological message from the book is God's patience and faithfulness. In the face of Israel's rebellion, every time Israel cried out in suffering, God heard them and raised up a deliverer. Judges 2:18 says, "Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, he was with the judge and saved them from the hands of their enemies throughout the lifetime of the judge. For the Lord had compassion on them as they groaned under those who oppressed and afflicted them." God never completely abandoned his people, even when they abandoned him. His mercy and compassion always outweighed his anger, giving Israel another chance. And so we come to the end of our journey through the book of Judges. We've seen how God used imperfect people to rescue his people whenever they cried out for help. We learned about great judges like Deborah, Gideon, and Samson, and we witnessed how Israel kept falling into a cycle of disobedience followed by suffering. The book of Judges still has a lot to teach us today. It shows us that God is faithful even when we're not, and that he can use anyone to fulfill his purposes despite our flaws and weaknesses. If this story touched your heart and you'd like to keep learning more about Bible stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Just click the subscribe button below. When you subscribe, you won't miss any new videos, and you help us keep making this kind of content. You can also help others discover these amazing stories by sharing this video with your friends and family. Just click the share button and choose how you want to send it, on WhatsApp, Facebook, or any other social network. Is there a specific Bible story you'd like to see in our next video? Let us know in the comments below. I read every comment and love hearing your thoughts. Thanks for watching all the way through. May God bless you and your family, and I'll see you in the next video.